everyone, welcome back to another podcast. So excited you decided to click on this video. I'm so sorry guys. These past 2 weeks have been absolutely crazy. I've been so busy with church and just other stuff, so sorry for not uploading these past 2 weeks, but we will start getting back on track. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I asked on my Instagram not too long ago. Give me topics about what you want to hear about. And one lady commented on process. And I was like, that is really interesting. And that is a really tricky subject, I feel like, because it's such a broad kind of topic. But the Lord really gave me something that I really do believe in my heart that I am supposed to speak about this, and what specifically about process I'm supposed to speak about, he already gave me that. So I'm going to be speaking on process, and I will get more into it later, but first we have to pray. So if you don't mind closing your eyes and bowing your head. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you yet again for giving me the opportunity to be able to speak your words and speak your truth and be able to spread your love and your truth to other people online. Lord, I pray that you would help me in this video, that you would guide me, and that you would lead me to say the correct words, and that the words that come out of my mouth are only from you and not my own. Lord, I pray that you would begin to open the eyes and ears of those that are watching this video so that they may receive what you have for them. And I pray against any distractions in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about process. Process is something that we all have to go through in life, and that could either be for the process of you getting into your calling, the process of cooking a meal, what it takes like during that process, the process of getting into a relationship that God has for you, or process of college applications. There's so many different things that we all have to go through a process before we get to those things. And I really like to view it in a way that the Lord actually just gave me right before this video. So I was setting up my camera to record it, and I have this like whole weird setup. It's so funny. And when I picked up the thing that I was going to use to put my camera on, a puzzle piece fell, and I didn't think anything of it. I was annoyed, actually, that it fell. I was like, whatever, I'll just put it off to the side. But then I looked at it again once I finished putting the camera down. I'm like, wait, that's what process is. It's a puzzle piece. When you first have a puzzle, obviously nothing's put together. And you're going to have all these pieces that are going to have to come together, and some of them aren't going to make sense until you put the other puzzle piece in. And it's just the way process is like putting together a puzzle. There's piece by piece, and some pieces are going to be harder to find. Some pieces you're going to find that they don't fit, so you're going to have to get rid of them until later. And overall, in the finished product, it's because all those puzzle pieces came together eventually. And that's really what process looks like. There's going to be lots of times where you're going to fail at stuff. There's going to be lots of times where you get a snippet of what God has for you after the process, and you're going to want to rush because God gave you that little snippet to keep you going, but that's actually not meant for now. There's blessings that are going to be sent to you along the way during the process. There's things that are not going to make sense. There's blessings that you're going to see for later, but you can't grab onto them yet, because if you grab onto them, it's not going to benefit you in that moment. So I don't know if you see what I mean about the fact that process is such a wide and broad topic, but it is honestly something that we all need to learn about, because we call process the waiting season. And right now you may be going through a waiting season where you're waiting on something that God has promised, or you're waiting on an answer to something. And those seasons are the hardest. It's really a test of faith, because things are not going to be going your way. Things may not look all put together, again, because it's like a puzzle piece. Until you have all the puzzle pieces together, some of the things are just not going to make sense. And while I do agree, yes, it is, you are waiting on something, so that's why it is called a waiting season. I think that season is actually the most important because it is the process of what gets you to what you're looking for or what God is trying to give you. So I like to call it a preparing season. So during that waiting season, remember that is the most important season. That is a season where you have to work on yourself. Let's say, I want to give you an example so that it could be easier to relate to something. But let's say you're waiting on a job, okay? If you're waiting on a job, what are you going to do in that moment to prepare yourself so that when you get that job, you already know what to do? So if the job is, let's say, constructing or interior design, you're going to have to do all the studying. You might have to get a license for that in the first place. You might have to update your resume. You might have to, I don't know, build a routine. If you're going into the Air Force, if you're going into the Army, if you're going into the military, you have to change your routine because you know that you're not going to be able to have the same routine, most likely, unless if you already have the routine, but you're not going to be able to have the same routine that you do now as when you go to the military. They have a strict sleeping schedule. You have to be fit. You just have to be really responsible and be really disciplined. If you're waiting on having kids, what are you going to do in the meantime? You have to mature yourself and learn to put others first, because when you have kids, unfortunately, but fortunately, they go first. Obviously, I'm not saying to put yourself aside. You still have to care about yourself, but now it's about them. So you have to mature. You have to build a routine, because when you have kids, you have to have a routine. You have to prepare your home for when you have kids. You might have to change something, some furniture, because maybe it's super sharp or the kids might hit it or whatever it is. You're going to have to adjust things in your life. Prepare yourself so that when that time comes of whatever it is that you're waiting on, you're already prepared. Because you can't just sit around and do nothing and expect that to come into your life and you just magically be prepared. That's not how it works. So that's why I like to call it preparing season rather than a waiting season. And in reality, we're always in a preparing season, because there's not a certain age or a certain point in time where you're like, I'm done. Let me relax and just go on vacay. Like, there's always going to be a moment, whether you realize it or not, whether it feels like it or not, whether it looks like it or not, that you're preparing for something. And it might not be something big. It could literally just be you're preparing to get a new piece of furniture in your house. You have to make sure you have the space for it. You have to make sure that area is cleaned up. So regardless, even in those little things, you're always preparing for something. You're always waiting on something. So I know that sometimes it's hard. Don't get me wrong, like on those waiting seasons, preparing seasons, through the process, a lot of things are not going to make sense. In fact, you might even want to give up. You might be like, I don't know why this is happening. It just makes no sense. But you have to remember that you are human, we are human, and we can't see the bigger picture that God does. And so some examples of that, I'm going to give you some people from the Bible, because practically everyone in the Bible went through everyone in the Bible went through insane processes, I think that's the word, to get to what God wanted for them. And so, first one I'm going to be talking about is the process of David. So, David, as we know, was a little shepherd boy, and he was rejected from his siblings, from his family, because of how tiny he was and how weak he looked, per se. And so, because he was a shepherd, even though he may have been mad sometimes, like, why am I being rejected by my own family? Why, like, God, why are you having me do this? Because of that, he was able to grow a really strong relationship with the Lord. So I always ask for the Lord for this. Lord, make my heart like David's, because I want to have that relationship that he had with you. All the time, every day, he would talk to God. Like, all the time. Like, you know how sometimes we be talking to ourselves sometimes? Like, it's kind of weird. Like, if someone caught us, like, we would definitely not look normal. That's the same way he was talking to God. And so I bet you people were probably like, who is he talking to? But he was talking to God, and that's how close a relationship he had with God. So God needed him to have a close relationship like that due to his future calling. Well, not his future calling, his calling in life. And also, another thing that happened during him being a shepherd was he had to defend his sheep from a bear and a lion. Recently, I watched a show called The House of David, and they showed how he killed a lion, and I was like, wait, did that actually happen? So I had to do some research, and yes, he did kill a lion and a bear defending his sheep. Now, the reason why that is so important to know is because, as we know, he had to kill Goliath, the Philistine, the giant. And would he have the courage to do that if, A, he didn't have a close relationship with God like he did, and B, he hadn't killed a lion and a bear? Probably not. And so during that time, whether it looked like we're like, really, I'm doing this and I'm called to be king, which obviously he didn't know at first, it's like, Lord, what does this have to do with anything? Like, what am I doing? Why are you having me doing this? It's because he needed those experiences to get to the courage and bravery that he had to be king, because being king obviously is not for the weak. If not, we could all be king or queen. So God needed to prepare him and to take him through that process that did not make sense at all in the moment, but at the end it made sense. Another person that I want to bring up, there's a couple people from the Bible that I want to bring up. Obviously not everyone, because we'll be here all night long, but another person was Esther. Esther, she had to marry King Xerxes. What happened was King Xerxes, he called his wife over during some kind of party that they were having, if I'm not mistaken, and she refused. And so, low-key, I feel bad when I think about that. I'm like, imagine just saying no because you couldn't say no to the king, because you literally genuinely didn't feel like it, and you just have to get a divorce because of that, or better yet, killed, which thank the Lord she didn't get killed, I don't think. But you could be literally sentenced to death if you said no to the king, so that's scary. But Esther had to marry King Xerxes, which is intimidating enough, but on top of the fact that it was against her will, because when King Xerxes divorced his wife, he called all the girls so that he could pick. And obviously the Lord had to make Esther extra appealing to him so that he could choose her. Obviously, we know Esther was beautiful, but there was probably other beautiful girls too, right? So he had to show his favor on Esther and show his favor on King Xerxes' eyes with her. And so that's exactly what happened. And to anyone, that's like, wow, like, she was forced against her will to marry the king. And yes, that sounds so cool to marry a king, but you could be killed. You have to live a certain way. You're held up to a standard. She was against her will. Like, no matter how you look at it, it was just a scary thing. And so I bet you during that moment, her people and her, because she also couldn't say that she was a Jew yet, were like, crap, like, what do we do? And it probably seemed like, God, why would you allow this to happen? Are you joking? Like, why am I going through this? Such an innocent girl. And all along, it was to save her own people, because when she, through that process of her being married to him, the Lord had to show favor on their marriage so that he can actually listen to what she had to say about her people, because that must have been scary, not telling him that she was a Jew. And all of a sudden she just had to be honest, which it's not that she was lying the whole time, but she was keeping it from him that she was a Jew. And it's like she could have probably gotten killed with the rest of the Jews. But because God showed favor, because she obeyed during that process, she fulfilled the calling God had. So that's also another example of lengthy, not make sense process that ended up working for the glory of the Lord. Another person, which this one isn't as bad as King David and Queen Esther's story, but it still requires a level of humility to get to this point. And who I'm talking about next is Ruth. Ruth had the humility and the heart to stay with Naomi after she became a widow, because if you look back in the Bible, she says, no, like, I'm not leaving you. Even after Naomi tells her to go, no, I'm not leaving you. I will go with you wherever you go. And I bet you in that moment, Ruth was like, okay, like, yes, I have to stay with you, but I have a whole life ahead of me. What am I going to get married? I don't want to be here, like, taking care of, like, a person the rest of my life, which sounds selfish, but at the same time, think about it. You want to have a good life and a good future. So that required a level of serving and humility too. And because she stayed with Naomi, she got to meet Boaz. And obviously that was a beautiful marriage as to how that happened. And it was through that process of her staying with Naomi, of her serving Naomi, of her having the humility to lay down her life basically to take care of Naomi. Sorry if I'm looking at the camera a lot, because I just have to make sure it doesn't turn off. But the amount of humility she had to have to lay down her life to go with Naomi, it must have been a high level of humility, because no young girl would be willing to lay their life down to serve a woman that has already gone through her life, if that makes sense. So those were a few examples of what the Lord gave me of people going through a process. And so something that I actually saw on Instagram earlier, which has everything to do with the topic of today, is this. Hold on. So this guy named Noah Heron, I think is his name, he posted, Noah looked like a fool until it started to rain. Moses looked like a fool until the Red Sea split. David looked like a fool until Goliath fell. The disciples looked like fools until Jesus rose from the dead. And so that right there sums up everything of how a process is going to look. You're going to look like a fool. Things are not going to make sense to you or to anyone else, maybe. Or maybe things might make sense to you, but no one else. And that is the beautiful thing about a process, is that the whole idea of going through a process is so that you can be where you want to be, so that when you get whatever it is from God, you're prepared. Because if you don't go through a preparing season, if you don't go through a process, how are you going to learn how to handle what blessings the Lord wants to give you? This is something that the Lord gave me about a week ago, I would say. So I was asking the Lord about some things in my life, and I was like, Lord, why are you giving them to me now? Because I sometimes feel like I'm not ready for what you're giving me now, but at the same time, the way you're preparing me is like nothing I've seen before. Like, yeah, the way he's preparing me is just, yeah, it's crazy to me to see how clearly the Lord is speaking to me. And so he said, basically, I don't call the ready. I don't call the people that are already prepared. I call those that are not ready and those that are not prepared. And then I prepare them. And then I make them ready. And another thing that he said to me is, sometimes I know we ask God, Lord, I know the promise you have for me. Why can't you just give it to me now? And the reason why is because you may know what God has for you, but that doesn't mean you're ready for it, because you need to prepare in order to know how to handle that blessing and how to receive it at its fullest potential. So, for example, let's say you want a new car and the Lord promised you, yes, I'm going to get you a good car. Maybe you don't know how to handle a car. Maybe you don't know what it takes to maintain a car. Maybe you don't know how to change a tire and you're going to need to know how to do that. And the Lord is like, I can't give it to you now. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to give you so that you can prepare, but I can't give it to you now, because if I give it to you now, the thing is you're not going to be able to enjoy it. And it's going to go to waste if I give it to you now. So I need you to learn some stuff so that when I give that to you, it's not. So one thing we have to understand is the Lord doesn't just hold blessings from us just because he wants to be mean, because he wants us to dread it or whatever. He holds on to them because, again, he sees the bigger picture and he knows what's best for us. And he's the best parent. And so he wants us to enjoy life. He wants us to enjoy his blessings and his promises, but how are we going to enjoy them if we don't even know how to handle them? And so that's really the mentality you have to have, because if you have that mentality, you're going to look at it with such a grateful mindset, such a thankful mindset. And if you have a thankful mindset, you can't have anxiety about it, because where there is gratitude, there can't be anxiety. So I really hope this podcast helped you in the season that you're in, because even though I do these podcasts, that doesn't mean I'm not in a process. This podcast itself is a process, and everything is a process. So really meditate on this and ask the Lord to help you throughout these many processes that you're going to go through in life, whether big or small. And I really hope this video enlightened you. And if you watched to the end and liked it, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you want, you can hit the notification bell so that anytime I post a new video, you can get a notification so that you can watch it. And if you want, go ahead and share with friends or family or whoever the Lord leads you to watch this video so that they can know how to go through a process, because it is very important for everyone to know how to go through a process with a thankful mindset. Alrighty guys, so I'll see you in the next video. God bless you.